I don't have much personal experience with depression, but I know a lot of people who have, and I know it's not easy. It's not a passing feeling one can just get over, or a veneer of sadness one can choose not to feel. It's a pervasive and colossally difficult struggle, and one that's never truly over. Celeste is a game about climbing a mountain. The protagonist, who can be named as the player wishes but is canonically called Madeline, is a young woman who has traveled to Celeste Mountain, somewhere in Canada, to climb it for, as far as even she understands, little reason other than to prove she can. The climb is difficult, and the mountain's strange power only makes it more so, but Madeline is determined to make it to the summit. Celeste is a platformer that might remind you a bit of Super Meat Boy in its simple input, complex level design, and brutal difficulty. Your only controls are moving, jumping, climbing, and dashing, but the way the levels are designed make the game significantly more complex and difficult than that makes it sound. It's one of those games that counts deaths rather than lives, which isn't nearly as unique as it once was, but still says something about the kind of experience you're going to have while playing this game. Celeste isn't necessarily a game about trial and error, but it is a game about fast, precise movements, which means it's a game about learning through failure. And you will fail a lot. Thankfully, the game is very difficult, but not at all punishing. It's set up in sequences of rooms. They're usually rather small, and dying anywhere inside them just puts you back at the beginning of the room. No game over, no major setbacks, no sparse checkpoints that set you way back each time you fail. So while it absolutely is a difficult game, it's somehow not a particularly frustrating one, at least not for me. In fact, as the game went on, I became increasingly less frustrated with failure, just chuckling at whatever stupid thing I did to get myself killed and immediately moving on. Failing and getting back up to try and do better just became second nature. And to that end, I enjoyed the experience of playing Celeste a lot. The level design is the star of the show from a gameplay perspective, using the platforming mechanics to create a great number of platforming challenges about quick, precise, intuitive movements, and some similarly great, more puzzle-like sequences, where it's less about being fast and accurate and more about figuring out how to climb and jump to get around obstacles to where you need to be. This subgenre of platformer isn't really my forte, so feel free to take this next statement with a grain of salt, but this is probably the most enjoyable of its ilk I've played. And I think it's absolutely worth noting that, rather than having traditional difficulty settings, Celeste basically has a mode that allows you to tweak how specific mechanics work to make things easier on yourself. It's called Assist Mode, and when you activate it, the game gives you a really nice message about how the game is designed to be difficult, and the creators believe that's central to the experience, but they also want the game to be accessible, and have provided these options for people who would otherwise be unable to experience or enjoy the game at all, which I think is a really great sentiment and just plain good design philosophy. And the nice thing about Assist Mode is that with a few different options for how to change the game, players can alter the gameplay in minor ways that address the specific difficulties they have in playing it. If things just move too fast for someone, they can slow it down up to 50%. If the stamina system is making it hard to climb certain parts, they can eliminate that mechanic. If they really just can't get past a certain part, they can even make themselves invincible, or give themselves infinite dashes to move past the room and continue on. I just really like that the player can make small tweaks with the game if they're having too hard a time to enjoy or complete it, or have access to nuclear options like invincibility if they get to that point of giving up in a certain room. Difficulty is central to the experience, on both a ludological and thematic level, don't get me wrong, but I'll never decry having options for people who would be otherwise unable to experience the game at all. But probably the most impressive thing Celeste does is the way it uses its gameplay to communicate the idea of what this battle with depression is like for Madeline. Climbing a mountain is a sensible enough metaphor for the struggle with depression in the first place, but that's not just a narrative concept, it's a ludological one as well. Celeste is a game about 1,000 little failures and the constant drive to get back up and try again. It's a game about getting into ruts, trying the same thing over and over again and getting frustrated with yourself until you can manage to break the cycle and get it together. It's a game about not letting those failures get to you and instead learning from them so you can manage it more easily next time. It's a game about that feeling when, after dying countless times, you finally make a perfect run that makes you look like the greatest player alive. It lets you fail, it makes you learn, and in the end, it doesn't feel as much like you struggled as like you overcame. It's unquestionably an uplifting experience in the end, but the way the process of the gameplay can mirror the types of battles people have with depression and anxiety is very impressive on the game's part. What's more, certain segments are made to basically resemble panic attacks, with additional hazards that force you to react to more than just the environment as you make your way through the game. The game is hard enough as it is, but suddenly there are new worries that force you to move a little faster, make it harder to think on the fly, be a little more reckless, and serve as a constant source of stress adding to the existing challenge of the game. The story isn't as metaphorical as the concept or the gameplay, and the climb is ultimately framed, narratively, as a challenge that helps Madeline to further understand herself, her limitations, her strengths, and her depression itself. There are multiple points in the story that took my breath away with how real and affecting they felt. The stress of a panic attack, the peace of a solution, the sorrow of failure, they all show themselves in both the process of playing and some powerful moments of the story, and I am very much here for it. When I look at games like this that deal with important real-life issues, I often see two different kinds. The kinds that speak to people who relate directly to it without meaning as much to people who don't, and the kinds of games that help foster empathy and understanding in people who don't directly relate to the subject matter, but in doing so don't quite feel real or affecting for those who do. Celeste is one of those great examples that works both to relate and to educate. So those who have experienced depression can see themselves in it, perhaps take away something valuable from it, and those who haven't experienced it can look at their time with this game as something of a way to understand people who do. This is one of those things I think video games are uniquely capable of doing in powerful ways, but it's still so rare we actually see it happen. And for that reason, along with its genuine high quality in just about every area in Games as Lit 101, Celeste gets an A+ and a high recommendation to pretty much anyone. I mean, at least give it a shot. It's worth it.